In the year 1460 BC, a city of over 500,000 people stopped existing. Not in decades, not through famine or plague, in 10 days. The streets that had carried merchants, philosophers, and children for 6 centuries were underwater with blood. And when it was over, Rome didn't just claim victory. Rome declared that Carthage had never mattered at all. That erasure, deliberate, systematic, and almost total, is the real story. And it begins long before the fire. Carthage, a name you've heard, a city you were told lost. But losing is not what happened here. What happened here was something colder, something more calculated than any battlefield defeat. To understand it, you have to go back to the beginning, to a Phoenician settlement on the North African coast, founded around 814 BC in what is now modern Tunisia. A city that would, over 7 centuries, build one of the most sophisticated civilizations the ancient world had ever produced, and then be wiped from the face of the earth by a neighbor who feared what it represented. At its height, Carthage controlled the Western Mediterranean in a way Rome could only dream of. Its merchant fleet dominated trade routes stretching from the Atlantic coast of Britain to the ports of Egypt. Its territories included modern-day Tunisia, western Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and large swaths of the Iberian Peninsula, what we now call Spain. The city itself, built on a peninsula jutting into the sea, was designed for power. A double harbor, one commercial, one military, allowed Carthage to deploy hundreds of warships while simultaneously managing the largest trading network in the ancient world. Ancient sources, including the Greek historian Polybius, estimated the city's population at somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 people. That placed it among the largest cities on Earth at the time. But Carthage was not simply a mercantile empire. It produced agricultural science so advanced that when Rome finally destroyed the city, they preserved exactly one Carthaginian text, the farming treatise of a writer named Mago, translated into both Latin and Greek because Roman senators recognized it was more sophisticated than anything they had. Carthage had a senate, a legal system, and a class of elected magistrates called suffets. It practiced a religion that Rome found deeply unsettling, centered on the god Baal-Hamon and his consort Tanit. And it built temples, harbors, and neighborhoods that archaeologists are still excavating today beneath the hills outside Tunis. And then there was Hannibal. Son of the general Hamilcar Barca, Hannibal Barca crossed the Alps with war elephants in 218 BC and spent 15 years moving through Italy, defeating Roman army after Roman army. At the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, he killed an estimated 50,000 to 70,000 Roman soldiers in a single afternoon, one of the worst military defeats in Roman history. Rome survived, but it did not forget, and it did not forgive. By the middle of the 2nd century BC, Carthage was no longer a military threat. It had lost the Second Punic War in 201 BC. Under the peace terms dictated by Rome, it was forbidden from raising an army, forbidden from waging war without Roman permission, and stripped of its overseas territories.
Carthage had become, in effect, a wealthy, disarmed city-state, a trading hub that posed no realistic danger to anyone. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Because one man decided it wasn't enough. His name was Marcus Porcius Cato, known to history as Cato the Elder. Cato was a Roman senator, a conservative, a moralist, and by the last years of his life, a man consumed by a single idea. According to the historian Plutarch, Cato ended every speech he gave in the Roman Senate, regardless of the topic, with the same sentence: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. Not defeated, not contained, destroyed.
In 149 BC, Rome manufactured a pretext for war. Carthage had defended itself against attacks from the neighboring Numidian king Massinissa, a Roman ally, without asking Rome's permission first. That was technically a violation of their treaty. Rome declared it an act of aggression. The Third Punic War had begun. Roman consuls arrived in North Africa with an army and a sequence of demands designed not to be met. First, surrender all weapons. Carthage complied, delivering to Rome 30,000 suits of armor and 200,000 projectiles, as recorded by the historian Appian in his Punica. Then came the second demand: abandon the city entirely. Move inland, away from the sea. For a maritime civilization, this was not relocation. It was a sentence of slow death. Carthage refused. And then something remarkable happened. The city decided to fight. What followed was a siege that lasted 3 years. A city that had surrendered its weapons somehow held off the Roman army. Citizens melted down gold jewelry to cast new blades. Women cut off their own hair. Appian records this specifically to weave into ropes for the war machines. They built new ships from timber torn from their own homes. They fought with the ferocity of people who understood clearly that surrender was not survival. In the spring of 146 BC, the Roman general Scipio Aemilianus, grandson by adoption of the Scipio who had defeated Hannibal, finally breached the walls. What came next was not a battle. It was an extermination. Roman soldiers moved through the city district by district, street by street, house by house. Appian's account in the Punica describes soldiers ordered to kill everyone except those who could be taken as slaves. People threw themselves from rooftops rather than be captured. Bodies were buried under rubble as soldiers pulled down the buildings above them, and the soldiers walked on the dead to reach the next block. Appian writes that Scipio wept as he watched. Then he ordered the city burned. The fire burned for 17 days. When it was over, between 150,000 and 200,000 people were dead. 50,000 survivors, mostly women and children, were sold into slavery. Those numbers come from Appian himself, writing roughly 3 centuries after the event, drawing on earlier sources that no longer survive. The Roman Senate then issued a formal decree. The site of Carthage was to be cursed. No one was to build there again. The story that Rome salted the earth so nothing would grow, that detail appears to be a much later invention, added by 19th century historians. But the curse was real. The intention to erase was real. The city was gone. Destroying the city was only half the project. The other half was destroying the memory. Rome controlled the historical record of the ancient Mediterranean. The Carthaginians had an extensive literary tradition, records of their voyages of exploration, their religious texts, their philosophical and agricultural writings. Almost none of it survived. The one exception, Mago's agricultural treatise, survived because Roman senators voted to preserve it for practical reasons. Everything else was gone. We know Carthage almost entirely through the accounts of the people who killed it. Polybius, Livy, Appian, these are Roman-adjacent sources. And Roman historians were not neutral observers. The Carthaginians, in Roman accounts, were treacherous, cruel, and obsessed with child sacrifice. The Latin phrase Punica fides, Carthaginian faith, became a Roman idiom for bad faith, for broken promises. It was the ancient equivalent of a propaganda campaign that never ended, because there was no one left to argue the other side. The question of child sacrifice is one historians still debate. The ancient sources describe a sacred precinct, the Tophet, where the remains of infants and young children were buried. Roman and Greek writers claimed these were sacrificial victims. Modern archaeologists excavating the sites at Carthage and at Motia in Sicily have found the bones. But whether these represent sacrifice or infant burial, a common practice in the ancient world given high child mortality, remains genuinely unresolved. What is clear is that the Romans had every reason to amplify the worst possible interpretation, and they did. The Punic language survived in pockets of North Africa for centuries. The philosopher Augustine of Hippo, writing in the 5th century AD, mentions hearing it spoken. But no literature, no history, no poetry in Punic survived in any meaningful form. An entire civilization's interior life, what they believed and felt and remembered, was simply gone. What happened to Carthage was not an accident of history. It was a policy, a deliberate, voted upon, systematically executed decision to make a civilization disappear. Not just its army, not just its government, but its people, its language, its memory. The lesson that history keeps refusing to learn is this: the victors don't just write the history. They decide which histories are allowed to exist at all. Carthage had a name for itself. We don't know what it was. We know it only by the Latin word its destroyers used. That, more than the fire, is the real burial.